It means that I have to give my 110% so that all the rappers under me can give their 110%.
Ice Cube may have finally cracked a mystery that has long haunted black pop culture about Tupac, and his revelation will leave you speechless. Tupac seemed like the proper gangster rapper that the mid-90s produced as a reflection of black energy. But under that gangster energy, Ice Cube saw who Tupac really was. What exactly does Ice Cube know about Tupac? Will his revelation be enough to end the mystery around his life, his status, and his death? Join us as we discuss how Ice Cube subtly untangles the mystery around Tupac's legacy. Ice Cube's third instinct about Shakur. Since the early inception of the rap game in black culture, the evolving industry had churned out names after names and legends after legends. But like they always say, the cream always rises to the top, and in the 90s, Tupac Shakur, Biggie Smalls, Eazy-E, Coolio, the NWA, and Ice Cube rose quickly to the top of the pile, projecting and protecting the image of rap music and navigating the nasty underworld in the industry that came with being a part of the rap game. Tupac, at the time, had the world eating out of his palm, releasing hit after hit since he signed with Suge Knight's Death Row Records and took over the West Coast as one of the biggest black MCs at the time. But despite all that success from Tupac the rapper, who had created an air of myth and mystery around his persona with his controversial displays, not many people really knew who he was behind the scenes. But if there is a calm voice of reason out there who has seen the rap game chew up black kids from good homes and the need to adapt to the cutthroat world that the game gives to them, that person is Ice Cube.
So Ice Cube gon' pump it up. Y'all wanna know how we make the music? We sample. You hear that?
He was already a big star who wrote some of the biggest hits in the 90s for top rappers in the game at the time, before he became a heavyweight in the industry with his group, Niggas with Attitude, popularly called the NWA. And that stint with the group solidified his stance as a Tier 1 rapper in the rap game at the time, and also a big West Coast legend. This deliberate stratification between the West and East Coast, which was fueled by the constant talent rivalry and the difference in gang loyalty, was no news to Ice Cube. He wasn't some distant spectator who saw from the safe distance of his gold castle. He was there at the table, seeing how everything worked. So he got a front row seat, viewing Tupac's life, his inner circle, and how much it fueled the rage inside of him. But according to Ice Cube, Tupac wasn't just the thug life provocateur that the world and the media made him out to be. Cube described him as a cool guy, with whom he had some really respectful interactions. While Cube's stance on that little mystery behind who Tupac really was seemed viable, especially since he had a close affiliation with his inner circle.
But I like to say when a brother kills a brother, man, the only people that's happy is the other man.
Too many things about the thug life lyricist just didn't really align with Cube's narrative. If Tupac was really humble behind the scenes, why did his Cadillac always seem to steer him straight to the next chaotic beef? West meets East. The rap game in the early 90s was a pressure cooker of the beefiest rivalries. It was perfectly set up, almost by divine providence, that each side of the country had some of the best rappers around, releasing records after record, climbing the US charts, and doing insane numbers in sold records. On the East Coast, they boasted of rappers like Biggie Smalls, Craig Mack, Mace, and The Lox, who were all signed under P. Diddy's Bad Boy Entertainment. On the flip side, the West Coast had supreme talents like Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, The Dog Pound, and MC Hammer. The talents were enough to make anyone's head spin as they battled to become the most dominant force in the United States and globally. However, in the mid to late 90s, Death Row Records had way more hits and had more records sold, leading to jealousy on the other side of the fence. However, their success wasn't only celebrated on the West Coast. They brought it to the East Coast and seemed for the first time that they were threatening to expand all the way to the East and possibly throw P. Diddy out of business, as they promised better contracts and better treatment of their artists. This was more than just business and expansion as a result of success. This was a rivalry that spanned across more than just music. Gangs on the East Coast were on high alert, with allegations that P. Diddy was in bed with them, setting up assassination hits, and paying for their services from the shadows, where he hid his motives and let everyone else play his game. Although this purported expansion by Death Row Records, spearheaded by Suge Knight and later Tupac, when he joined, appeared like a hostile takeover at the time, sources close to Tupac Shakur believed that he was only trying to be in the mix with the high rollers in New York and help other New York artists get what they deserved. The message was clear. He wasn't going in as some choir boy looking to suck up to the preacher. He was going in as a force from the West Coast, which Ice Cube once described as a simple blip on the radar at the time. Until the NWA, and apparently, Tupac came into the industry in Los Angeles. Biggie and Tupac had reportedly shared studio rooms, discussed music, the music business, and were also believed to be planning to make a serious hit rap song together. It was the obvious way to somehow bring back the love among African-American rappers and make everyone else fall in line. However, strife and chaos awaited Tupac in New York when he got robbed in the lobby of Quad Recording Studios on November 30, 1994, and got shot 5 times. How exactly did that event reshape Tupac Shakur? From bullet shells to jail time and a war nobody saw coming. 5 shots to the chest can definitely change a man, and Tupac was no different. To most people, he was at the wrong place at the wrong time, trying to record a verse for an artist called Little Sean, and got spotted by thirsty robbers who wanted his $40,000 jewelry. At first, it seemed like peace was an option between both Tupac and Bad Boy Entertainment, as he was just on his way to help an East Coast rapper with a verse before he was riddled with bullet holes. However, Tupac was convinced that he had not only been robbed, but also set up by the leader of Bad Boy Records, P. Diddy, whom he believed was jealous of his relationship with Biggie Smalls. But just why did he think that? His rationale was basic, but it made sense. No one else in the world knew about his plans to meet Little Sean at the time in the studio, except for him and Little Sean. But in the same recording studio where he had planned to meet with Sean, Biggie Smalls and P. Diddy were right in the next recording room in the same building. Tupac's theory was that they had stayed in there waiting to hear the shots and be one of the first few to confirm that he had finally died because they planned it anyway, and he claimed that he had about enough proof to back up his claims.
Or the agents or somebody was there when I got shot, and nobody could give me no information. Just study that.
However, Diddy had vehemently denied it, claiming that he had absolutely nothing to do with it. But Tupac was a man out for blood. His soul was wounded and his trust was broken. And right there, a beast was born, seeking vengeance on all those who had wronged him. But here comes the kick in the teeth. While he was in the hospital, recovering from his gun wounds, he was being tried in court for sexual misconduct with a teenager. Just a little over 2 months after the robbery incident, he was finally sentenced to a 4.5-year jail term, which was to be served at the Clinton Correctional Facility in upstate New York. At this time, he was at the lowest point of his career and personal life. He had been allegedly backstabbed by the men he called friends, and now he was shuttled to jail with the possibility of serving almost 5 years, while his career took a back seat or simply fell into obscurity, and no one would know who he was anymore.
The chance to make right from all the bad things that I got, I got a lot of things against me.
Then came the king of the West Coast at the time, Suge Knight, the CEO of Death Row Records, who posted his bail and gave him a contract that had him leave his New York roots and become a part of Los Angeles, where the West Coast really came alive. How much did his signature to Death Row Records really elevate the status of the West Coast? California Love. Immediately after his release from jail, Tupac was determined to get back into the game and put a big gulf between the East Coast and the West Coast. And he did just that by releasing the biggest song of the year, 1995, in California Love, a music that immediately set the tone for the West Coast and had them challenging the concrete jungle of New York. The song made it to the US Hot 100 charts and stayed there undisputed for 2 weeks. However, the influence stretched outside of the United States and reached a global scale. tilting the balance between the East Coast and the West Coast in the West's favor. The song was topping charts in Italy and even New Zealand, a country that was not really popular for its hip-hop culture. Although his music was doing numbers and creating a new sense of appreciation for rappers from California and Los Angeles, that was only a side quest for Tupac. His real agenda was to show Bad Boy Entertainment what type of talent they had missed out on, and finally take the fight to them, on the microphone as a lyrical genius, but also in the streets as a thug who never backed away from a fight nor forgave a slight. Speaking of slights, the Tupac robbery in 1994 on the East Coast already created a divide between Tupac, Biggie, and P. Diddy, who Shucker believed to have been the mastermind anyway, with Biggie as his puppet, who just dances to the tune.
If you was to get shot 5 times, mine is just completely spinning, you know what I'm saying? You're real confused about your situation.
Tupac's continuous interviews in the media had put Biggie and P. Diddy in bad press. Although it was only written as rumors, that was enough to affect their reputation and their business. Bad Boy Entertainment wanted to do something about that. So, he gave Biggie the authority to rip into Tupac with a diss track, Who Shot Ya?, which was released in February 1995, when Shakur was still in jail. There was no possibility of his ever creating a response good enough from jail, so he waited for months, nursing that anger and building it up until he got the opportunity to let it all out. However, he was too vicious to only let it all happen lyrically. He wanted to create real-life problems that would send pain directly to the East Coast and would be felt really heavily when he released his response to Who Shot Ya? So he played his little games and created a nasty plot, allegedly luring Biggie's girlfriend at the time, Faith Evans, to his hotel on the West Coast and made love to her. Although Tupac did not come out to say it in an interview.
They've said it in the... I can't understand why it's this close. They talking about there's no evidence that I ever sodomized.
He surely did in his response to Biggie's diss track, Hit 'Em Up. How did this land on the East Coast? And how did they respond? Hit 'Em Up. Hit 'Em Up was a manically written track with one purpose and one purpose only, hurting Biggie, P. Diddy, and all of Bad Boy Entertainment as a whole. And it did just that. The rap game came with a street code, where respect for a man comes from never getting his jewels snatched. The metaphor was an attack and a taunt on Bad Boy Entertainment. The point was to murder Biggie and Diddy's entire street credibility, and he did it perfectly. The lyrics and the rhythm jumped right at fans on first listen, starting with scathing remarks on the East Coast and name-dropping Bad Boy Entertainment, Biggie, and P. Diddy before launching the menacing lyrics. But one of the bars stood out like a sore thumb. It was a direct affront to Biggie to let him know that he had just allegedly had his girlfriend Fatih Evans in his bed. While Fatih had vehemently denied it,
I didn't really know a lot of the details about what happened, but it was clear that he took a jab at Puff at the Source Awards and stuff like that.
Tupac's ex-girlfriend, Desiree Smith, backed up his claims. But he did not stop there. He made references to Biggie's Who Shot Ya? With a hook in his song, telling him that his killers did not finish the job, and now they had to deal with the wrath of a menace. The song hits directly, and it intensified the heat between the East and the West Coast, with the Crips and the Bloods, the biggest gangs in the African-American demographic, allegedly also getting involved and picking sides. The song was more than just a response to Biggie's Who Shot Ya? It was a generational firestarter in hip-hop pop culture. However, aside from the success of the diss track, the West Coast had started to dominate the headlines, and the world of rap was asking for an extension into New York. But why was the East looking so badly to bring Death Row Records into their domain when they already had Diddy and Bad Boy Entertainment? The reason was quite simple. Rappers in the streets of New York had allegedly found out about Diddy's little schemes, where he signs a rapper to his record label, gives them a significant signing-on fee, but that becomes the only significant paycheck that they are going to receive from him. He was not just signing artists, he was creating an empire for himself where he was king and had other people slaving away when he cracked the whip.
Responsibly, so, you know, I'm a responsible person. You can't just be able to rip these caps off in the store. And
for some context, Craig Mack, who had one of the biggest records, Flava in Ya Ear, in 1994, only had the blings and watches to show for it. However, he was always cash-strapped, according to his ex-wife. They were broke and lived from show money to show money. It wasn't a sustainable concept, especially as Diddy overcharged him for clothing. Broke or not, he was a superstar who represented bad boy entertainment. Hence, he had to look the part. Death Row Records had its top artists shining and on top of the world. Their lifestyle reflected their hard work, and the East Coast wanted some of that. This call for help from the East Coast, paired with the message and success of Hit 'Em Up, had Tupac in the line of fire, and it led to his death in 1996. While a lot of things could be blamed for his demise, especially Keefe D, who was suspected of having orchestrated the drive-by shooting, Ice Cube, a real legend of the West Coast, and Ice-T, Shakur's former mentor, have come out with a backstory that untangles the whole mystery behind what led to the thug life crooner's death. How much did they really know about the influence of Death Row Records on his life and his death? Ice Cube and Ice-T's views on Shakur's horrible demise. Ice Cube, legend of the original rap game since day one, finally broke his silence on the difference between the Tupac the media saw and the one he had gotten to know personally. Tupac was born to Billy Garland and a very prominent pro-black movement mother, Afeni Shakur. Afeni raised her son to be his people's hero, a liberator who had education and came from the great values of fantastic parenting. That was the version of Tupac Shakur that Ice Cube had met, and he believes that he was tainted by Death Row Records' boss, Suge Knight. Ice Cube described Tupac's entire thug life, hood king, and gangbanger vibe as a version that he adopted in the rap game. Ice Cube is way too old school to neglect the importance of mentorship in the rap game, as fame could get in the head of a child who had never been in such scenes since he was born. For some context, Cube had John Singleton, Ice-T, and Eazy-E as men he could look up to in the game, which kept him grounded. For Tupac, what that meant was that he needed to have an inner circle that did not protect him from the truth about what real life looked like, instead of being an echo chamber for all the hate that he carried as a result of some of his past experiences, especially the 1994 robbery. Cube claimed that Shakur was ready to make music like NWA, and also enjoyed working with John Singleton, with appearances on movies like Poetic Justice, where he was the lead actor beside Janet Jackson, who played the female lead.
He'd go to the liquor store and buy a 40-ounce of beer. Always thirst for change.
His whole persona was a different thing in the Ast, and the music that he wrote in that period was a perfect reflection of his black movement political upbringing. For some context, he wrote Changes 3 years before he became a part of Death Row Records, 1992, a track that described the importance of black love within the African American community and exposed the invisible hands of the white supremacists who foster the obvious collection of guns in the black neighborhood. Cube believed that it was not quite normal for a level-headed, fun dude with vibrant energy to suddenly become different overnight. However, meeting modern-day Dr. Frankenstein in Suge Knight was more than enough to create Frankenstein's monster. His inner circle was a complete mashup of the most street-coded men on the West Coast, where letting a grudge go was a sign of weakness and retaliation was the only genuine response of a thug. And since he had already created the thug life persona as part of his image with Death Row Records, breaking out of it without losing the brand, fame, and money was not a bet he could afford to take.
So that everybody else, all the peer rappers like the Dogg Pound and Snoop, to give their 110%.
But as much as Ice Cube had some access to Tupac's inner circle, as he had worked with a lot of the stars who worked at Death Row, including Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and went on tours with them, he was not the only rap legend who really knew Tupac Shakur, the man hiding behind false masks of anger and irritation. West Coast legend Ice-T, who is considered to be one of the inspirations of the rap genre, claimed to be a mentor to Tupac before he started to overreach. He claimed that he had tried to keep him from the clutches of the street, but Suge Knight had raised him to be the killer and bled more hate into him. which led to the creation of his vulgar legacy, Hit 'Em Up. But what exactly did Cube have to say about Shakur's Hit 'Em Up and the false image it created of him? Ice Cube untangles the mystery behind Hit 'Em Up. Ice Cube has always had an affinity for rhymes since he was a kid, hence the reasons he had top songs on the charts before he even became a rapper. But even before he was mainstream, he was a fantastic battle rapper. Pen game and lyricism were his greatest strengths. But over the years, Tupac's Hit 'Em Up seems to have taken the shine as the greatest diss song to have ever been made in black hip-hop history. But he believed that to be a rather wrong assessment, as many might imagine that Shakur solely wrote the song that took on Bad Boy Entertainment. Ice Cube reveals that he actually had help from Outlawz and the whole of Death Row Records. For Cube, his diss track, No Vaseline, which he released in 1991 on his album Death Certificate, was a much better track. His reason was simple. He had no help, and he was taking on the members of a crew that he used to work with, the NWA. As expected, his revelation drew a little noise and racial jokes directed at him, but he did not mind it at all. In Cube's opinion, Tupac was a fantastic MC, a maverick, and a better person than the thuggery his legacy seemed to have left behind. But he was not an all-timer. Could Tupac's life and career have gone any better if he had simply let go of the East Coast-West Coast beef? How much of black success in hip-hop can really be credited to Tupac's innovation? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.